Hello and welcome back. I'm Vinny Catalano and I thank you for joining us again today. Insider trading, just how important is it? Well, we're going to find out in a moment with my guest, Steve Feldman, with the law firm in New York here of Herrick Feinstein. Stephen, welcome.
Thank you very much for having me, Vinny.
On June 12th, here at the New York Society, I see that there's a program called In the Crosshairs. The Department of Justice and the SEC focus on insider trading, and you, along with one of your partners, are one of the speakers. First, tell us a little bit about you, your firm, and then we're going to get into the program that we have that's coming up shortly.
Thank you. Well, I head up the white-collar criminal litigation practice, the Herrick Feinstein, which is a regional law firm here in New York and in New Jersey with about 165 attorneys. And we have a team of former federal prosecutors, SEC trial enforcement attorneys, and people who focus on the commodities industry, who represent industry folks in their regulatory and legal battles. I was a federal prosecutor at the U.S. Attorney's Office here in Manhattan for 6.5 years, and the big chunk of that I spent in the Securities and Commodities Fraud Task Force, where I prosecuted insider trading cases, securities fraud cases, broker bribery, pump and dump schemes, all kinds of securities issues. And now for the past 6 years, I've been representing people when they end up in the crosshairs, whether it's in the U.S. Attorney's Office or the SEC or FINRA or other, the New York AGs. When there are issues involving those kind of issues, we help them try to get out of it, because those can be the most critical times in someone's life where they're facing that kind of scrutiny.
Absolutely, and you being on both sides, or having been on both sides, have a pretty good understanding and knowledge of it. Okay, let's talk a little bit about this particular event. I think one of the things that maybe many of those that are watching, the members mainly, that they might think, well, I work in a job and I don't engage in insider trading, and I'm at this end of the business or that end of the business. Talk a little bit about just insider trading in general and what any investment professional really needs to know, and then we can get into some of the particulars.
Well, anybody who's read the papers has seen over the last 6 years or so that insider trading has become very hot. That the U.S. Attorney's Office here in Manhattan, my former bosses, and the SEC have made insider trading one of their top priorities. And they've prosecuted dozens and dozens of people, criminally as well as even more in civil matters, across the country. So if you're a securities professional, you're in an industry where the scrutiny is just intense. In fact, the U.S. Attorney has compared the people in the securities industry, in some cases, to being like the mob. That they are getting together and making plans about how they're going to violate the law. And the tools they've used to now go after potential violations have gone up too. They're now using the tools of going after the mob, things like wiretaps, to go after securities professionals.
Sure.
And
almost like RICO type stuff in a way?
Right. I mean, in a sense, that's what they're doing. They're treating these as conspiracies, and they're going after groups of people who they think are getting together to violate the securities laws. And you can fit in all sorts of ways. They've gone after analysts, they've gone after traders, they've gone after people who fit in, hedge fund folks, they've gone after hedge funds themselves. So you can have all sorts of different roles in the industry and end up in the crosshairs.
Now, what should someone do in general? This is generic, and then I want to get specifically on some of the items you're going to talk about at the program coming up on June 12th. What does someone need to know to understand, okay, we get that aspect of it, there's a level of concern. And I know that the CFA Institute, organization here that New York Society is a part of, that they've put on a pretty strong effort recently in regards to the future of finance and elements that are there. So talk about what the individual practitioner in this business, some of, an item or two that they may want to be sensitive to.
So look, what the individual practitioner needs to know is they need to understand enough about what the insider trading laws are, so that if they come into a situation, they can identify it and raise their hand and ask for help.
Sure.
Because some of these laws are complex, and you may not know whether you can or can't move forward with a trade or with a recommendation based on particular information, but you should know enough to raise your hand and ask the question. What are common things they should be watching out for? Expert networks have been a big deal. So if somebody is turning to an expert whether somebody they're hiring or somebody they're finding on LinkedIn, and asking that expert for advice. There's some questions they should be asking in advance before they get information from that expert. Is that expert allowed to be moonlighting? Is the expert being paid? Do they have a current job with the company they're talking about? Those would all be red flags that somebody needs to worry about.
Be informed, but not be paranoid.
Well, you need to ask.
Paranoid?
Well, in this world, I think you ought to be paranoid enough. I mean, there are situations where what you think might be okay, but do you want to be in an investigation, even if you're ultimately proved innocent? Being dragged through that is so painful that there are times when, if you come across certain information, even if you don't think you've done anything wrong, you might want to pass on using that information in your trades.
Understood. And now, in terms of organizations that may not have big compliance departments, that I would think is an area of great vulnerability. I mean, you're running a small shop, you have a small group of people, you think you're in the clear, and it turns out that maybe you inadvertently stepped across a couple of lines that you didn't fully appreciate that you did.
Well, it can go two ways. I mean, one is you can be doing everything right and have a rogue employee who's out there on their own because they know they're going to get a bigger bonus at the end of the year, or even they're trading in their own personal account, but they're doing it, based on information they're learning at the office. So there's the rogue employee threat that's hard to control.
How does a firm protect against that? They take that one point about the rogue employee. Okay, I'm the rogue employee. I'm doing the outside trades in my own personal account. You're my superior. What do you do? How do you have to get copies of statements?
Well, of course, you have to get copies of statements, but people can, of course, lie to you and not tell you all the accounts they have. But more than that, you have to put in a complete compliance policy so that if that rogue employee draws the attention of the authorities, you can say, look, we tried to be a good corporate citizen. We taught them what insider trading is. We monitored their personal trading. We had methods in place that if somebody suspected wrongdoing, they knew who to report it to. If we had a whiff of wrongdoing, we investigated it. And if we determined that something went wrong, we dealt with it. We fired the person. We made changes. Those are the kind of things that protect the entity, the corporation, from being charged when a rogue employee does wrongdoing. Because you want to, at that point, convince the government that you did the right thing, that you were a good corporate citizen.
Well, there's so much there. And to have the right kind of counsel, the right kind of advice, the right elements that are in place. This is, I would imagine every one of the investment professionals and others watching this really needs to be, acutely aware.
Well, I think that's right, and I think in this atmosphere today, where it seems to be Main Street versus Wall Street, everybody looking at Wall Street as the bad guys instead of as people building our economy and helping create business. They need to be watching out for the fact that the regulators are susceptible to pressure. There's political pressure to do more all the time, and somehow make the markets fairer, and that puts everybody in the crosshairs. Yeah,
in the crosshairs, perfect. In the crosshairs, the Department of Justice and the SEC focus on insider trading. June 12th is the date here at the New York Society. I believe it's 6 p.m. to 7:30.
That's correct.
Okay, and it's you and your associate's name is?
Me and my partner, Howard Ellisoffen. Howard's a former SEC trial enforcement attorney who spent years doing that, as well as at firms and in-houses of securities.
Fantastic. And for members at $20, student members of $15. I don't know where you're going to get an opportunity to meet this gentleman and to learn as much as you really need to know. Stephen, thank you so much.
Vinny, thank you very much for your time.